happening here? We're going to tell you that tomorrow. Here's Chris.
Hey, everybody. I'm Chris Cuomo. Thank you for the company. I ask you to help me figure something out. If I were to tell you, breaking news, a dozen kids murdered while playing soccer, dozens more injured, some critically, you'd be outraged. I don't have to tell you where or how. It doesn't matter. Harming kids, let alone murdering kids, it's the highest wrong. Doesn't matter where in America or in the world, right? Certainly when it happens in Gaza, we have campuses roiling international condemnation, the media asking hard questions to IDF officials, politicians on the left for sure refusing to sit for Israel's prime minister when he came here to address Congress for exactly that reason. So here's my question. Why is it different when it's the Jews? Why is it different when the Jews die? Why isn't another massacre of innocent children in the Golan Heights by a barrage of bombs anything but an opportunity to remind that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, which it isn't, I submit, or to otherwise basically ignore the death of Israeli children? And this isn't because it happened on the weekend. It happened on Saturday in the Golan Heights. You know, until the Trump assassination attempt, I had never seen a terror attack qualified as quickly as October 7th was. The numbers are disputed. The accounts of rape are disputed. The culprits are debated. Maybe Israel did it, or at least some of it. No one makes points with equal fervor about Hamas when people die in Gaza. No one reminds with similar derision, except here, that the terror organization is hiding among innocents it doesn't let leave, that it didn't tell what was coming while taking their food and often killing those who don't comply. No qualifying of the killing in Gaza, but it is different when it's the Jews, isn't it? A dozen kids murdered on a Saturday playing soccer. Are you aware? Are you disgusted? It's certainly not dominating the news. No speech by Trump except to say his apparent opponent, VP Harris, hates the Jews. Harris made herself vulnerable to the attack, oddly since she's married to a Jewish man, because she has ignored the attack. And she is associated with the left flank of the Democratic Party that has certainly been partial to the Hamas cause. Lawmakers, media, even social media. Social media gets turned up by a girl saying, "Look, too," but not by dead Israeli kids. That's not trending all over the place. All accounts I've seen, except Hezbollah saying, "Wasn't us." Who else would fire a barrage of dozens of rockets from Lebanon onto children just over the border in Israel? No international call for that terror organization to be acted upon, condemned. Why not? There's more energy spent saying that the Golan Heights is a disputed territory that the UN says Israel should return to Syria. Israel won the territory when it went to war against three other countries in 1967. Ironically, Golan is a biblical term for a city of refuge. Not refuge for the Jews, not now at least. More questions go to how Israel may overreact to the murders than to how this is exactly why Israel can't accept any of these illusory ceasefire options. These people want to kill them. Hezbollah, Iran, the Houthis, Hamas, all these other proxies, all around them, want to kill them. You, or some of you, respond to that by saying, "Yeah, ever think about why?" So that murdering is okay? Hey, look, if we get in the rationale game, you can rationalize just about anything, can't you? The most frustrating piece for me is that you can have it both ways. Israel's attacks have gone on much too long. There's too much death, especially to non-Hamas women and children. Hamas must return the hostages. Over 300 days, including the Americans that this country barely plays lip service to. A little bit at the RNC, maybe you get a little bit at the DNC, maybe not. And all those other young people, military, non-military, male, female, where are they? When do they get given back? Then you negotiate a ceasefire with Hamas being replaced by a regional consortium of protection and facilitated elections of non-terror actors who don't campaign on eradicating the Jews. Now, our middling posture on this war worries me. I believe it adds to a potential expansion of hostilities. Forget about the fact of the hypocrisy. If this happened, God forbid, if we got hit like that in America, the way they got hit in the Golan Heights on Saturday, we would level Lebanon. You know it, and I know it. It is shocking that we have been so passive about our hostages. Don't we care about our own anymore? What, do you want to know what party they are? Here's my problem. I don't think we're going to be talking about this hypothetically for long. If this continues, it can only go one way: expands. And if that expansion is mismanaged, it could become a holy war. How? What do we have to do with it? If Turkey gets in as the leader of Turkey gestured to today, the NATO member, by the way, can you believe that? It is Muslims attacking Israel. And there are plenty on the right who want to make it about Christianity and Christians' right to parts of the region that Islam wants to take from them and oppress Christians in that region, which they do. All the same enemies of Israel. So it's not just that kids were killed and people don't really seem to care. Not just that it should bother you that when Jews die, it matters. And that when Jews die, it doesn't seem to rankle nerves the same way. That should bother you. But Israel is fighting against forces that hate us too and would love to take us down. And the longer this goes, the more dicey it gets for us to go from watchers to only a matter of time before we are actors. Now, I don't want that, but I'm telling you, that's what happens. Failing to plan is planning to fail. We have no plan in this situation, and it's dangerous. Now, like I said, former President Trump didn't say much about the Golan attack except to say something stupid about Harris. But he did spend time on Christian voters, saying that they only need to vote one more time, then they'll never have to vote again. Listen.
Christians, get out and vote just this time. You won't have to do it anymore. 4 more years, you know what? It'll be fixed. It'll be fine. You won't have to vote anymore, my beautiful Christians. I love you, Christians. I'm a Christian. I love you. Get out. You got to get out and vote.
I feel like he was saying, you only have to vote for me one more time. I'll fix it. But there's another interpretation that he was suggesting that if he gets voted in, he's going to end democracy. I don't see it, but we'll discuss. And it also adds to the fervor for VP Harris. The ABT vote, anyone but Trump, is very, very real. And we are seeing early honeymoon period, no question about it. Democratic officials have their backs against the wall. They're doing everything they can with this swap from Biden to Harris to get momentum. So on Friday, we talked about the Zoom call, white women for Harris, right? They also had black women for Harris. Tonight, happening right now, another Zoom. This time it's called White Dudes for Harris. And there were well over 75,000 people signed up the last time I checked. But again, we've never seen anything like this. Now, white guys matter, okay? Trump won white males decisively in the last 2 elections. He won white women also, by the way. But, I mean, he runs away with it, especially when you get to non-college educated. So let's bring in one of the organizers of the White Dudes for Harris Zoom, Brad Bauman, and the former Republican Lieutenant Governor of South Carolina, my friend who just called me today and we reconnected, and perfect timing because I got him on now, Andre Bauer. Now, Bauer is a unicorn. He is friendly with Trump and was very friendly with Harris. They traveled the world together, so he has unique insight. Thank you both, gentlemen. I appreciate your patience listening to me wringing my hands about what's happening in Israel, but I'm very worried about it. Brad, what is the point behind white dudes for Harris, and how many do you think are going to be on the call?
So, Chris, first off, thank you so much for having me on. Well, I've got good news for you. As of 7:30 tonight, we had 122,811 people RSVP to join this Zoom, which is just extraordinary and unprecedented. We're floored by the amount of support that's out there. The truth of the matter is that, as you were saying before, we know that Donald Trump has traditionally done very, very well with white dudes like us. But white dudes like us, we're getting a little fed up of his shtick. I think that there are a lot of white guys out there who are rightfully asking questions about whether democracy is safe with another 4 years under Donald Trump. And they're starting to look around at a lot of the people he surrounds himself with and a lot of the nationalists who are yelling and screaming and that he quietly winks and nods to and saying, it's not the America we're looking for. And so that's what this call is about. It's to get us together so that we can start talking about it.
Now, Andre, ordinarily, I would come back at Bauman and say, 120,000, that's not going to win you any election. But I learned from the Trump rallies in 2015, 2016, and that when you get big groups of people, sure, as an electorate, they're not dispositive, but they are indicative of a movement, which certainly is what MAGA is. What do you believe Harris will struggle with when it comes to white males, no matter how many people are on a Zoom call?
Well, first, Chris, thanks for having me on. Great to see you again, buddy. I think they're actually tuning in. I think they made a good move. The Harris camp made a good move. They know they've got an issue there, and they're reaching out to him. So I actually think it's a pretty smart political move. Donald Trump reached out to African Americans in 2016 and said, what do you have to lose? And his numbers went up. And in 2020, he came back again and said, give me another opportunity to serve you for 4 more years. And his numbers went up again. So I think it's a smart move by the Harris camp. However, there are a lot of obstacles to overcome with a lot of that group because they're concerned about the economy, the border, inflation, her talking about raising corporate taxes, the debt limits, spending, not allowing fracking. You go down a litany of issues that really don't align with her and where the party is going, the New Democrats that have, I think, changed pretty rapidly. And so that you see a large portion of what I call good old Johnny Lunch buckets that are fed up with the direction the country's gone in the last 3.5 years.
Quick bounce question to you, and then I'm going to end up with Brad. Kamala Harris. What do you think of her personal ability to deal with the DEI criticisms that are, kind of laid at her feet as if she's the ultimate example of it, and the conservative notions that Democrats are not compatible with them? Does she have the personal skills, Andre, in your experience, to talk to these people and be persuasive?
She has very good skills, no question. However, most of these policies do not resonate with the average American voter. I don't care how much they tell us the Green New Deal. I don't care how much they tell us inflation's only 4 or 5%. It's not. Your gas prices are double. Your milk price is double. Cost of houses has gone up exponentially. So these policies, no matter what they say, are going to be very difficult to walk away from. And that's why Biden's numbers got very bad against Trump. And she's had a honeymoon phase. And actually, she came out the gates a lot stronger than I thought she would. And I really thought there'd be a little more fighting within the party. So I was impressed how much they came together very quickly and supported her. But when it gets down to issues, the Republicans are right on so many more of what mainstream America is feeling the pain from.
Well, Brad, here's the good news for you. Andre makes a cogent case. But fortunately for you, Trump does not. Here is what Trump is deciding to make his theory of the case.
This room is amazing. The people in this room, high IQ individuals. I'm running against a low IQ individual, her. I'm not even talking about him, her. I got a low IQ individual.
She was a bum 3 weeks ago. She was a bum. A failed vice president in a failed administration. By the way, there are numerous ways of saying her name. They were explaining to me, you can say Kamala, you can say Kamala. I said, don't worry about it. It doesn't matter what I say. I couldn't care less if I mispronounce it or not. I couldn't care less. She doesn't like Jewish people. She doesn't like Israel. That's the way it is.
So he could be talking about issues that affect people's lives, but he believes you destroy your enemy. What is the counter for Harris?
First, I just want to address what we saw there. If the guy were like a TV show, I think the producers would be getting ready to run out the clock on his contract. It's the same old crap that he's been peddling for years and years and years. And honestly, it just doesn't resonate anymore. And the new stuff, the stuff that folks have been seeing where, nationalists are talking about, the ways in which they want to bend our Constitution until it breaks. It's just enough for us. And so, we're going to see Kamala Harris come out there and we're going to see her actually talk about the economic growth that's taken place under the Biden administration. We're going to talk about the jobs that have been created. We're going to talk about the investments in infrastructure. Chris, I spent about 15 years as a communications director for members of Congress, mostly in the Midwest, places like Youngstown, Ohio. I know what's actually happened to these places. I've been in these steel mills, and I know why people are frustrated. And guess what? It doesn't have anything to do with Biden. It has to do with 30 and 40 years of failed economic policies that we've started to turn a little bit of the corner in after the pandemic when we had a little bit of a reset moment. So honestly, I think we're in a pretty good place in terms of communicating to white men. And I'm very excited that my friends and over 100,000 people right now are kind of talking about the campaign and hearing from a bunch of, great potential VP candidates. It's going to be awesome. Well, let's see how it goes. You got to make the case because the pain is real. What is the remedy? That's what this election should be about. All right, Mr. Baumann, thank you very much. Andre Bauer, good to have you back in the loop. Thanks for calling me today, and we'll talk again soon. Thanks to both of you.
Thank you.
I'm going to take a break. 4 minutes and 5 seconds. My team is saying to me, hey, the kids who were killed in the Golan Heights, they were Druze. They're Arab. They're not Jews. They're Israelis. This is in Israel. That's why Israel is saying that they're going to retaliate. I mean, yeah, you're right. They're not Jews. They're Druze. Does that make it okay? Does that make it okay? Does that mean it's okay for us to ignore it? Because what are they? An other? So Israel shouldn't do anything about it? Either you care or you don't. I guarantee you, if they were Druze kids in Gaza who got killed, even though they'd never be there, they wouldn't draw the distinction. Why now? Because it's different when it's Israel. Coming up, some really disturbing new details emerged today, exposing the failures across multiple layers of law enforcement that were assigned to protect Trump. Now, the local SWAT team was on TV. Very rare right there, okay? Very rare for cops to take to the media. They say they didn't hear from the Secret Service until after Trump was shot. How? Experts giving their answers and their questions. This morning, we witnessed a very rare event. A local SWAT team that was assigned to protect Trump the day that someone tried to assassinate him went on morning television to talk about the failures in communication between them and the Secret Service. Take a look.
We were supposed to get a face-to-face briefing with the Secret Service snipers whenever they arrived, and that never happened. So I think that was probably a pivotal point where I started thinking things were wrong, because that never happened, and we had no communication with the Secret Service.
You had no communication with the Secret Service at all on that Saturday?
No, not until after the shooting, I believe. Yeah.
And by then?
It was too late.
Now, if that is true, you go to, well, why was that? Was that an intentional lack of communication? Was this misfeasance, meaning they didn't do the job right, or malfeasance, meaning they did the job wrong on purpose? Now, we haven't seen any proof of that, but this is going to raise questions. So, Let's discuss. Former Secret Service agent Paul Eklof, who protected multiple presidents, including Trump, and former FBI Special Agent James Galliano. It's good to have you, Jimmy. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Paul, once again, to have you both. Jimmy, let me get you in on here. Boy, I'm right? We never see SWAT team members going on TV like this to talk about operations. What do you make of that, and what do you make of the communication gap?
Well, first of all, Chris, I always chalk things up, and you kind of alluded to this, to Hanlon's razor in instances like this. And it always comes back to mistakes, incompetence, things like that, as opposed to, you pointed out, malfeasance. I think there is going to be a colossal collapse here in the investigation that is determined that the interoperability between the local SWAT team, between the Beaver County SWAT team, the local police officers that were handling traffic, and the Secret Service, which had the lead here. They were the lead agency. Now, Chris, I'll say this. This is stunning to see local SWAT team members. You pointed it out. We do not come out and speak to things before an investigation has concluded. The Secret Service is going to painstakingly go through this. The FBI is running a concurrent investigation, and President Biden has suggested that there's a separate private inquiry that's going on. For this to come out now, it's bad form, and I think it's dangerous without having an opportunity to hear from the other side. They're not the lead agency in this. They're in support of the Secret Service. The Secret Service is in charge of presidential security. In this instance, they should have waited until the investigation was laid out.
Gags makes a good point, Paul, but you know what? When people are worried that they're going to get blamed, and in such a conspiratorial environment that we're in right now, such an atmosphere of, that kind of concern, it makes a little bit more sense. But it leaves you in the same place. The question is, was this a breakdown in planning, or was it intentional? You're still in the same place, right, Paul?
We're in the same place, and this appears to be part of the blame game. And I don't want to question the motives of these brave officers and SWAT individuals, but I want to point out something no one else is reporting. This is a SWAT commander and a SWAT team from Beaver County, Pennsylvania. The site was in Butler County, Pennsylvania. The Secret Service tasked local ESU, local TAC, local CS, and they met with them. They met with Butler County CS and CSU, counter sniper and ESU personnel. Secret Service counter sniper personnel who were conducting the advance and working on Saturday had a full tactical walkthrough on Thursday. I can confirm from individuals on the ground. They met with the ESU commanders from local teams. Clearly a ball was dropped in communicating that information between the Secret Service, Butler County, and Beaver County. What we have here is a convergence of jurisdictions. The former president landed in Allegheny County near Pennsylvania, traveled to Butler County, which received assistance from its neighboring county to the southwest. They not only met on Thursday, the local counter sniper team and one of the working teams met the morning of the event, once again with ESU commanders with the local teams. Whether or not that was Butler or Beaver, clearly they're saying it was Beaver County, so they didn't meet. But the Secret Service counter sniper advance team, I am told, met with local ESU commanders. So to everyone's point, there is an investigation that needs to occur, and the Secret Service has got to get to the bottom of it. However, I don't understand how improving the Secret Service or ensuring that more lives are not lost is furthered by a meeting with the press. There will be blame to go around, and the Secret Service bears 99% of that blame. It's their fault. They failed.
Listen, here's the problem. The reason we have so much conspiracy think, everything has plenty of different explanations, right? The lack of transparency is a breeding ground for conspiracy think. And a lack of transparency makes people come out and want to state their case to the media because they get worried about being set up. We see this all the time, and it's one of the things that the media can do for society. Let them hear, and now maybe it will force something. But here's the problem, Gags, and you're going to want to hear this next interview as much as I do. They're not going to leave it up to the Secret Service. Congress is getting involved. Jimmy and Paul, I want you to listen to this member of Congress I'm going to have on, and we're going to keep talking about this conversation in later shows. They're taking up a congressional committee now, or subcommittee, to look at it. And I have big concerns about that and where it leads. I want to thank James Gagliano and Paul Eckloff for being with us. Now I want to bring in a member of Congress to discuss what we're going to do here with Representative Laurel Lee, Florida Republican member of Congress, just assigned to a bipartisan task force investigating the Trump shooting. Congressman, thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
Forgive me for my cynicism, but I worry when it's Congress, even though there is Democrats and Republicans, we don't have a great track record in recent history of you guys making things better with your investigations. Do you believe this will be different because it's very sensitive?
Well, I would dispute that. And really, one of the things you just said is a critical point, and that is transparency. If we get quick transparency for Congress and for the American people, that's one of the things that it will shut down false information or conspiracy theories that are unjustified. Because right now, the question is exactly that. Was this an absolute breakdown in communication? Was this just a failure in securing this mission? Or is there more to it? And is there a bad actor somewhere involved in this? And the point of this special group is to make sure that we bring that information to light right away, that we're not waiting for months and months for an internal investigation of Secret Service. And clearly, this is going to involve all of these multiple agencies. And that's what I think Congress brings to this that we wouldn't otherwise have. We need to hear from the local SWAT team. We need to hear from the state and local law enforcement officers who were part of this operation and part of securing this site. And only by getting all of those perspectives and all of that fact and information are we going to be able to get to the bottom of how this failure could possibly have occurred.
Well, I will be an optimist then. And I'm not going to ask you to speculate on anything because you don't know yet. You haven't done the investigation, so that would be unfair. What I will do is offer you an open invitation as this goes, because believe it or not, people are going to move on. We will not. So you have an open invitation, Congressman, and you can extend it to everybody on the committee. I don't care, red, blue, boy, girl, doesn't matter to me. If you want to come on so that the American people know what's happening, you are welcome to do so, and I thank you for doing so tonight.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. I think it's very important that we get onto this and we make sure that Vice President Harris, President Trump, any other protectee with Secret Service right now can have confidence, and then we go out in days and weeks to come that they're going to be kept safe.
And I was happy to hear that they covered Kennedy and Cornel West and Jill Stein. Listen, for us to start pinching pennies on this is crazy with all the other things that we waste money on. These are human beings. You can't replace them. So you might as well err on the side of more rather than less. But Representative Lee, thank you for joining us. You're welcome to come again.
Thank you.
All right. Take care and good luck with your duties. 4 minutes, 30 seconds. Coming up, we're going to look at this through a completely different set of eyes. Harvey Levin, TMZ, released a documentary about the assassination attempt where he takes you to the scene of the crime in Butler, Pennsylvania. He's got firsthand accounts from eyewitnesses who not only saw the shooting, but tried to save firefighter Corey Compratore, who lost his life there. Harvey Levin joins us next with those interviews, and who knows, he may wind up before Congress. Founder Harvey Levin has a new documentary on Tubi. It's called Under Fire, the Trump assassination attempt. Now, the interesting thing about it is that not only does it take you to the crime scene, but there are first-hand eyewitness accounts. Take a look.
This was the most traumatic experience of my life, and I would not wish this experience upon any other person.
It felt like 30 minutes that we were pointing at this guy on the roof, even though it was only, 2 minutes or whatever. And I'm just thinking, any minute now, any second now, I'm going to start hearing shots. And then we heard the shots.
You're administering CPR. At what point do you realize it's futile?
Harvey joins us now. Smart to do this, Harvey, very high interest, a lot of questions out there. What do you hope people take from it?
Well, what I hope is that the Secret Service
when the light is shined on them, which is obviously being done, is they make some pretty radical reforms, Chris, because this could not have gone worse. There was a lot of luck involved that more people weren't killed, but this was so botched from beginning to end. You heard this one guy with the beard talking about it felt like 30 minutes that they were trying to let people know this guy was up on the roof. It was actually 2 minutes when they saw him getting up on the roof, and they were pointing at him. They were talking to police. They were saying, there's a guy on the roof that doesn't belong. And a couple of police officers were looking for him. But to me, the key is that 30 seconds before the shooting, they were screaming, that guy, along with 75 people in his group, they were friends and family, were screaming, that guy up there has a gun. They were screaming, they were fleeing, they were panicked. And if you have sharpshooters right behind Trump that can look 147 yards, how could they miss the pandemonium? How could they not see the guy on the roof? Forget about shooting him. Why didn't somebody scream, get Trump down on the ground, or something like that? But nobody did anything. And this guy is saying it was like in slow motion. They're screaming, they're pointing at the Secret Service, pointing at the building, and nothing. And so this was just so botched that, that we talked to 4 former Secret Service agents, and boy, they gave us an earful.
Did you come away from it thinking that there are people who wanted this to happen, or do you believe that this is about people not doing what they were supposed to do to keep it from happening?
Yeah, I heard the last segment. We didn't go there, and honestly, we weren't trying to figure that out. I know there are theories about this. We were just looking at what actually happened that day and how the Secret Service, Chris, was configured. Because there's something I find really interesting here, that we talked to one former agent, and this is going to sound bad on the surface, but I think there's an interesting point here. He was talking about the number of women who were protecting Trump that day. And he was saying that they were 5 feet, 5 inches, 5 feet, 6 inches. How could they protect somebody 6'3"? Now, you could say that about men who are 5'6", 5'7", so it shouldn't matter whether it's a man or a woman. They shouldn't have anybody up there that short. But the point he was making is that they deliberately, he believes that the agency deliberately put half the people up there who were women for optics. So it wasn't so much that they were looking at who was tall enough, because if you look at Trump, he is exposed from the chest up when he stands back up. And if there was a second shooter, they could have fired a shot off and gotten him. So his point is that optics prevailed over protection, and that it's not about women not being capable, because they are. It's about the Secret Service brass putting women in there where there's a 6'3" protectee for optics. And I think it's an interesting point.
It is. I don't know that it's right, but it is certainly something to consider. And that is the beautiful gift of giving people information and perspective so that they can use it as food for thought. Harvey Levin, you're smart to do it, and I'm glad that you did, and I hope it does well on Tubi.
Thank you very much, Chris. Appreciate being here.
All right, so Harvey Levin, he's bringing it to you. He did the work, and he did it for you. So hopefully you get something out of it. Now, tonight, here at NewsNation, we're also on the case. At 10 p.m. Eastern, Brian Entin is doing a deeper dive on our angle, which is what went wrong, okay? He takes a look at all the different layers and all the different duties, and he has the 100-page original security plan. Now, my point is, this was way too complicated. There were way too many chefs in the kitchen. They had like a dozen agencies involved in this. They got to find a simpler way. Again, when you don't have the right plan, you're planning to fail. 3 minutes, 45 seconds. Up next, President Biden proposing big changes to the Supreme Court. Now, he can't make any of these things happen himself. It's all Congress, constitutional amendments. Do we need these changes? And is it all just political yap? Because none of it will ever happen. Professor Alan Dershowitz, who knows better than him? Maybe Geraldo Rivera. Both next. President Biden was in Texas today calling for Congress to take action to reform the Supreme Court and the presidency. He wants term limits for justices, more ethics transparency for the Supreme Court, and for the president, no more immunity for any president for crimes committed while in office. Let's bring in Harvard Law Professor Emeritus Alan Dershowitz and NewsNation correspondent at large Geraldo Rivera. Gentlemen, thank you both. I believe, Professor, the only one that has a shot is reforming the immunity laws of the president, that Congress might consider that. Do you see any of this happening, especially because term limits would require a constitutional amendment, and I don't think we could get one on what the name of this country is?
I think also the immunity case requires a constitutional amendment. The Supreme Court, correctly or incorrectly, found a constitutional basis for immunity. They went too far, I think, in also imposing evidentiary restrictions, and maybe Congress can pull back a little on that. Now, I'm in favor of term limits, but they require a constitutional amendment. Now, the thing that I think does have a chance of getting through, and here I disagree with you, is the ethics provision. I think it's clearly constitutional for Congress to impose ethics provisions and to impose and to have even a committee, say a committee of former justices, judges, university presidents, whatever, to come to conclusions about legal ethics. I think the Supreme Court today is untethered when it comes to legal ethics. Having said that, I think this is all badly motivated. I don't think that President Biden or Larry Tribe, who helped write this thing, give a damn about the structure of the Supreme Court. They're just mad at the Supreme Court for having ruled against them. If they had ruled in favor of them, none of this proposal would have been done. It's much like what happened in Israel, where you had judicial reform being pushed by the right because the right didn't like the fact that the left was being held by the Supreme Court. Here you have the left pushing it because it doesn't like the fact. It's all hypocrisy. It has nothing to do with structural or institutional reform. The entire legal system has become captured and weaponized by politics. That's the tragedy.
Well, the professor is right with the last point. There's no question about that. And I would say, Geraldo, he is also right about ethics reform getting through, except the Republicans would see it as an attack on their own justices, and that's why I don't think they'll touch it. What do you make of it?
Well, I think that they might see it that way because Chief Justice John Roberts has already imposed an ethical standard that did not heretofore exist at the High Court, and now, for instance, they're not allowed to take some billionaire's private jet, which I think is a very good thing, and there should be full disclosure, absolutely. But I think Congress mucks up everything. But I think that this particular project of President Biden is very curious, coming as it does in the eve of his presidential tenure. He's talking about term limits, for instance, Chris. He wants an 18-year term limit on justices, and yet he served 36 years in the United States Senate. So did he get the 18 by dividing his own tenure in the Senate by half? So I think that it is to me very curious that they would expend this much energy this late in a president's term with so little possibility of anything happening. Now, if Congress gets it, as the professor suggests, and they mull over what ethics reform should they impose on the High Court, can you imagine what a mess that will be? That'll go nowhere. It just seems to me that you started this show with Israel and what happened in Golan and the dead Israeli children. That's why isn't Congress focused on that instead of this nutty nonsense that amounts to nothing?
Well, look what's happening.
Because it's
the Jews.
We have real
it's the Jews.
Yeah, because we have real starvation in Sudan. Many, many, many more innocent people are starving, but Jews aren't doing it. And so nobody cares. Black lives only matter when they're taken by white people or other people, but they don't seem to matter to a lot of people when they're taken by other black people, like in the Sudan. Sudan is a real starvation. There's not going to be a single college protest. There's not going to be a single UN resolution. There's not going to be a single ICC investigation because Jews are involved. You're absolutely right, Chris.
I mean, look, the Golan Heights. These were Druze kids, right? I know Druze, Jews. They're a totally different sect. They're a minority sect. They serve in the military. They're Israelis, okay? And it doesn't matter, not because they're Druze and not Jews. It's not paying attention because it's Israel. And if Israel did the same thing in Gaza or in Rafah, it's all we would be talking about. And it's because there is a bias when it comes to Israel, which doesn't make any sense in America because they are fighting our fight. The people they're fighting hate us just as much, Geraldo.
I have spent a lot of time in southern Lebanon and the Golan and northern Israel with Druze, with Wally Jumblatt, the head of the sect when I was hanging out with them. They're very loyal Israelis. They work very hard. They're totally integrated into Israeli society in those regions, of Israel. And to see them victimized this way, I can't understand why Hezbollah this is clearly Hezbollah. They've tracked the missile. So this is clearly Hezbollah. Why would Hezbollah do that other than to provoke Israel, to distract Israel from finishing the job in Gaza? But to kill children and in such a blatant manner, no warning, just to drop a rocket on a soccer match, it's just so sick. And I hope people are righteously outraged by it.
You're asking the wrong question, Rob. You're saying why does Hezbollah do this? It's because Iran tells it to do it.
That's
Iran
right.
headed the octopus. Hezbollah is one of the Houthis are another arm, and I was hoping it was taking time to plan a retaliation because maybe they would now retaliate against the right people, against Iran, which is the villain here. By the way, the reason I love Aldo is because he knows so much.
You really want a state? You want Israel to
much about everything. You know about the Druze. You know about southern Lebanon. It's such a pleasure to be on with you. I learned so much.
Oh, I love. Well,
I'm glad to have you
too.
both.
But to take a retaliation against Iran is very, very,
very dangerous,
problematic in its own way. They got away with it once.
It's not going to happen. But if we don't manage this right,
let's not have World War III.
Yeah, that's the problem. If you don't manage it right, especially with Erdogan, who's a NATO member, Turkey, right, saying that he may get in, this changes to a holy war, and all of a sudden you go from the left, who's hyper-sympathetic to the Palestinians, to the right that's going to say it's about Christianity. This could go really ugly really fast. All right, I got to jump. Geraldo, I love you. Professor Dershowitz, I love you. Thank you very much. Quick break. Dan Abrams, next.
To reach adulthood. That's why vaccines matter so much. For 40 years, Rotary and partners have delivered vaccines globally. Like here and even here, in your neighborhood and around the world, Rotary is ensuring children grow up safe from preventable diseases.
Austin Cindric here, driver of the number 2 Discount Tire Ford Mustang, to give you a quick message about tire safety. As a professional driver, safety and winning go hand in hand. That's why we make pit stops. Off the track, I regularly check my tires and wheels too. Stop by a local tire retailer for a tire safety check on your vehicle, or do a quick check of your tire's tread with a penny test at home.
A message from the U.S. Tire Manufacturers Association.
My neighbor invited me to a Wounded Warrior Project event. I didn't know what to expect, but I felt like everyone understood me. We got each other. So I got more involved. I joined support groups with other women warriors, and it helped me realize a new purpose in